Welcome to Scintillations, the podcast where we explore hot takes on the business of branding, consumers, and culture. Each week, we talk to the top minds from businesses shaping tomorrow, cultural thought leaders, and people with an eye out for what's next. Whether you're a marketing professional, entrepreneur, or simply curious about the forces shaping the world of consumer business, we've got you covered. From the latest trends in consumer behavior to the cutting-edge strategies used by the world's top brands, we'll unpack it all, giving you the insights you'll need to stay ahead of the game. So, join us for scintillating conversations that will help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of modern business, including developments in artificial intelligence tools like this voiceover. And now, your host, award-winning brand builder, Erica First.
Good morning, Ashley. Thank you so much for being here with me.
I am so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we get started with you introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Cool. So my name's Ashley Rector. I'm the founder of Quimby Digital. It is a micro agency based in the United States, and we work with revolutionary brands to really up-level their social media marketing and paid media efforts.
Awesome. And today, the topic that we're going to be talking about really taps into your expertise since you work with a lot of these companies is what are some of the trends that you're seeing coming out of the startup world?
Yes, of course, which things have been shifting and changing in 2023. So I'm so happy to be here to chat all things trending.
All right, so go ahead and kick us off with the first one.
Okay. Yeah. So the first one is actually UGC and micro influencers, which you've been seeing a ton of content around. Brands have really recognized that authentic content is needed to connect with their ideal consumer, and who better to do it than actual human beings using their products. So you'll see the rise of the UGC content creator, and UGC stands for user generated content. So there are specific people that are just getting shipped product and showcasing the product themselves. So if you go on TikTok, a lot of clients or potential clients ask me this, you can actually look up UGC talk and you will find hundreds, if not thousands of UGC content creators that their whole jam is just creating content with product.
Yeah, and I've seen this. So I've seen this in a couple places. I know it definitely came out of Asia because they used to have a thing called KOL, which was the key opinion leaders. And then it became KOC, which is the key opinion consumers. And I've seen a couple of stores actually bought from one of the stores online, Korean Beauty, that you can sign up as an influencer for free. Right? You don't get paid, but it doesn't cost anything and it's open to anyone. And as long as you are doing reviews of the product, they will continue to send you product.
Yeah, which I think is brilliant and really shows like the evolution of social media. If you think about it, we went from like hyper curated feeds, if you remember, where everything was beautiful and it was like these production shoots and like no hint of, I don't want to say authenticity, but it was very polished, right? And now it's like, no, we want rougher content. We want to show like what the product looks like and like, the people's hands. And so it's beautiful to see like that total evolution. And then I feel like people always ask me like, what's the delineation between an influencer and a UGC content creator? And truly at the end of the day, like UGC content creators probably aren't posting the product on their personal pages. They're delivering that or the content, they're delivering that content to you, and then you're repurposing for the brand. And their followings might not be as big, but they just know how to shoot content in such a purposeful and beautiful way that, brands are hiring them to shoot content.
And it's so funny. So I'm a dinosaur. I was very active at the dawn of social media. Like I was working for Ray-Ban in about 2008, 2009, when all these websites were kicking off. And we started with UGC because people were so excited about social media that we would do whatever, like send us a picture of you with your Ray-Bans, and we would get thousands of images. And then as years went on, as consumers got more sophisticated, the idea that you could get a consumer to do something for you was insane. So, So now it's like interesting to see how it's come full circle, except now, before you were like, you can participate in the brand. And now it's almost like you have a position of power within the brand, which is the real.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
Okay. So what's your number two?
Yeah. So virtual reality, AR. I'm sure you've seen this on all social media apps. I mean, companies are having their own apps created like IKEA where you can put furniture in a room, but filters. I'm sure you've seen like you could put Winnie the Pooh in a room and it's dancing. So now brands are using virtual reality to kind of like bring their product or their brand to the consumer in a very unique way. So I don't think that that is going away. And I actually think that brands are going to get a little bit more savvy when it comes to AR. And there's going to be a huge push in 2023.
Yeah, because it seems like it's been around for a really long time. And everyone was like, no, it's going to break. It's going to break. It's going to break. But I think
Yeah.
there's so many obstacles to it, like maybe the execution wasn't done properly, had to have those gigantic things that ultimately people just do not want to put on their face unless they're gaming.
Yeah.
So I think, and maybe with TikTok being able to add all these filters and stuff, like the growth of the filter has
Yeah.
has made it more common and acceptable. What do you think is driving the acceptance now?
I so it's interesting. I kind of think that Snapchat actually is ahead of the game on AR. And I think what's driving it is actually consumers wanting the coolest next thing. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but if you think about it, when people are doing these like trending filters, they might be breaking a filter. So this gets into like my next thing, but like you're discovering something that's trending in the AR world and then you're putting it out there, but then you're almost looking like you're finding these like filtered gems in a way. And so I think that brands are getting savvy to creating some of these things because they're going viral in their own right. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's like it leans on like the consumers drive to wanna be seen, if that makes sense. So,
Right.
like, I don't know.
Well,
That's my gut instinct, though.
I think psychologically, there's an aspect that, of course, everybody wants to be the first to have discovered
Yeah.
thing, right? And before, once upon a time, it was the memes that you would email to your friends, and now it's using a filter. Then everyone else like, oh, I want to get on that. But I think it's interesting that it comes through these social media platforms because we were trying to treat it as something separate, and now it's integrated into
Yeah.
obviously there's no obstacles or barriers to usage. So now it's just really fun.
Yeah, or, like, trying on, like, lipstick or different hair colors or, I think that helps a consumer purchase when ultimately you're like, "Oh, this doesn't look so bad," even if it isn't, like, real necessarily, You're like, "If this color is close, like, yeah, this looks great."
I spent $400 at Fenty because they did the contouring filter, like
Yeah, see? Perfect
based,
example.
based on your size face, your shape face, this is how you need to contour. And yeah, like without even thinking about it, it's like, oh, this looks like fun. And then just bought $400 worth of Fenty products.
Yep. Perfect example.
Love you, Rihanna. What's your third one?
So, trending audio, which 2022 was doing this too, but now so 2023, we are like researching trending audios now to pair with content ideas. Before it was like, yeah, add a sound and it'll help reach, on TikTok and Instagram. But now it's like, if you notice, every single video people post, it always has an audio to it because it's an extra layer to get more impressions and eyeballs. So there's trending subscription services that have recently come out. We came out with our own, but there's other agencies who have done the same, but literally like recapping trending audios that are slowly about to become viral. And then brands are getting in on like, okay, like this sound isn't viral yet, but just on the cusp. And like, let's put that like content with that audio and let's see how it performs. So it's almost like content is becoming segregated to the production itself, what we're going to say, how we're going to shoot it, but then what audio are we going to pair with it?
And so I've always had a question about that because if the audio is trending and it's being used by millions of users, wouldn't that theoretically make your video harder to find?
So the way that we're sourcing trending audios, I guess, is like we're seeing like, okay, 1,000 videos got posted with this trending audio, and there's an increase in people tagging the sound, if that makes sense. So we know just from doing it for so long that like this sound is on the rise and probably going to go viral. So your video is going to get in sooner. So when people go to click on the sound, your video will pop up and that'll be like an impression, which the more eyeballs and interaction you have on your video, the higher it rises um, on the algorithm. So getting in earlier on a sound is actually better because more people are going to see it versus like if 2 million people have already done that audio, yeah, you're less likely to be seen.
Okay, so really like what you want to do is like you said, the service that you guys provide is really stay ahead of the curve before it's blown up. Because I thought like when I see like this has been used like 20 million times, well, then there's really no point in using it at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I feel like you have to know what your followers want, if that makes sense. So, like, sometimes jumping on a trend that everybody's done makes sense for your brand and it will get a ton of reach and engagement because it's super on brand for you. But most of the time, the brands are looking for audios that are on the cusp of going viral so they can get in and push their views further.
Okay. What's number 4?
Yeah. So, number 4, brand story. So, I think before we were just putting content online because we were like, this is beautiful. And that, we think this is what you want to see. But now brands are leaning into their narrative. What is their mission and who are the founders behind this brand? What do they care about? What is culture like? The entire brand story outside of the product is definitely something that every brand is really leaning into. And I think consumers care a lot more about than they did in past years.
So what's included in that in terms of brand story?
Yeah. So when we go into an organization and we're talking about like, what are your content pillars, right? Like, what are we going to create content around? We always ask them, like, what is your mission? What's your ethos? What are organizations you care about? What are some special things like that you do corporate culture wise with your employees? What matters? Like, what are those foundational pillars that you set in the beginning of your organization before it was $1 billion, $1 million organization that you really care about? Because we want to start talking about like the impact you're making on consumers. It's not just about the lipstick color. Like, does this lipstick color signify, breast cancer awareness month? Or is it a really important color because your grandma wore red every single day until she died and like it reminded you of X, Y, and Z? It's taking it one step further and understanding like what, I don't know, drove the company and what mission and values it instills, almost humanizing an organization truly
Yeah.
um, to
Yeah.
create content.
I think that's fundamental. And when I first started consulting, in the presentation that I would always do for people is that if you're going to play in social media, you have to have a human personality, and they have to know like what it is that you believe in. What's your psychological tension? What are you as a company trying to work out in order to be able to authentically respond to because you're on the same level as the consumers. And actually now I would say the consumers have more power than ever before, but you have
Yeah.
to be able to respond not as the guy in the suit reading off the top
Yeah.
as an
Yeah.
actual person.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think that's the biggest holdup sometimes with brands is that they don't want to pull back the veil too much because they're worried about polarizing their audience. But the saying, like, if you stand for nothing, like you'll fall for anything, I kind of think is true. You're not going to be for everybody, and that's okay. Right. So I think that like leaning in a little bit farther for your brand and showing like humans and your story, like you just need to do that because you're going to find the consumers who will be repeat purchasers, who will be like your fanatics,
Yeah.
and that's what you want. Yeah, and I think this kind of like leans into the last thing that I've been seeing. we're going to see more social media apps pop up in micro communities. So I think right now we have these big players, right? And this is just from what I've been seeing, watching, and what I think the future is. So you can take it with a grain of salt, but I've been doing this a very long time. But like Facebook, TikTok, we have these mega players, right? It's going to start to divide, I think. And you're seeing that a little bit with like the TikTok ban and almost like there's like a monopoly over the social media industry. And so I think like Circle's a really good example. Like micro communities are popping up and like Clubhouse, people having like these little groups that they get together every morning. And I think social media is going to fraction out and it's going to be very specific micro communities. And I think that brands are going to even more so have to choose. You know what I mean? Like this is where our brand values lie and this is where our community is. So imagine a world where it would be like, I don't know, like homesteading and organic food and like, you know what I mean? Like I can see these apps popping up and they're just micro communities or like fractions of bigger apps. And I think that that's what's going to end up happening.
Yeah, and so I was talking to somebody about this the other day because obviously Facebook under a certain age doesn't exist anymore. But what Facebook does have, which if I was Facebook, I would be leaning into, is the groups, the community.
100%.
Because and they have so many of them, and there's already like 100,000, 150,000. Those don't grow overnight, and they're hard to build because there are so many people building micro communities. So I find Facebook to be very useful for that. But then, like with the whole Twitter nonsense that was going on when Elon Musk took over, 5 different ones kind of like were birthed out of that. And so you have Post, you have Spoutable, you have another one that I can never remember, which is decentralized, and more like techie stuff. But there's lots of little guys coming up. And that has sort of been the trend on social media, like one thing happens and then it births something else, and then those birth other things. And it just, for a company, gets harder and harder and more confusing to keep up.
Yeah. And I think so Discord does this, obviously, like the different groups on Discord curating those communities. I just think that's where it's going. And so now back in the day, we used to be like, yes, we can be on every social media channel. That makes sense. Now it's like, no, we're choosing our hero platforms and maybe we'll secure handles and put up some content and other things so they know like this is an official brand. But truly, we're narrowing down and picking the channels that make sense for that brand and leaning into creating content there because you cannot create content on every single social media channel and do it well. And nor is your audience on every single channel. So I think we're honing into like, okay, this is where you're meant to be and let's do this really well, right? And then let's have your hero platforms and then you'll have your secondary platforms and we'll run those, but it's not going to be that time, effort, whatever that you put into the hero platform. So eventually it'll come a point where there will be no way to be on every social media channel. It just won't be possible.
Yeah. Although I question, because, one of the things that's been happening is obviously generational
Yeah.
platforms, because you had Facebook, which was more towards my generation, like the Gen Xers, and then you had Instagram, which is for the millennials, and then you have TikTok, which is for the Gen Z, and then whatever Gen Alpha is
Be
gonna,
real.
yeah, be real. The challenge is, as a brand, you always have to be filling the funnel for future consumers. You can't just speak to these people because these people age out and new people age in. So you do kind of always have to be refreshing in one sense. Or do you think stick with the same people? Do you think people will like move into that? It's a tricky thing.
Yeah. So I actually think it's so a good example is like Instagram and TikTok. We see those paired together all the time. That makes sense to me. TikTok, while like baby boomers aren't creating a lot of content on there, I know a lot of them who are consuming content. So I think we're looking at, okay, just because they're not posting doesn't mean they're not consuming, if that makes sense. So I think it's easier to look at these social media apps and think like, okay, we want to move to Gen Zers. Let's test this out. But we also know that baby boomers are still consuming content on here. So it actually hits our target audience and then where we want to be. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's looking at the app and seeing who's using it and then just deciding to test and play. But you still have to have your hero platforms that are where you're creating the best content on. And then they could change. So we've shifted. We've launched brands on Instagram, and for an entire year, that was the one that was driving sales or whatever. And then we started testing out TikTok and it switched. So that's not to say that it won't change over time. Everything evolves. But I think you just have to constantly be monitoring it and looking at the data and seeing campaigns and how they're interacting. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I had a conversation with another woman who her agency only does tone of voice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting what she does. And what she does is she guarantees that, like, obviously how you speak on TikTok is going to be different to how you speak on Instagram and Twitter and whatever. And so she finds a way where you can be the same brand in 5 different places without being inauthentic, which is a very, very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Because you can't
Yeah.
just take what you've done for Facebook or Instagram and pop it onto TikTok, because it's better to do nothing than to do the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Which I think is a common misconception. So a lot of people are just like, well, Reels and TikTok are exactly the same. So I'm just going to put up the Reel onto TikTok and it'll perform as well. And like, that's not true. So yeah, I think it's definitely like being purposeful with your content and understanding the different platforms and just, what they favor, what your audience favors. But that's what keeps me in business. So
Yeah, you're like, keep it up. But also now
yeah.
that both of the platforms have, like, they can read the
Oh God, I know.
digital fingerprint, and if they know it comes from TikTok, Instagram will squash it, and vice versa. There's actually influencers on both of the platforms that can tell you what the new rules are that you have to follow, and they're very detailed. And if you want to do well and it's not accidental, it's a full-time job.
Yeah, I know. I feel like some brands aren't like optimizing their text on screen for search, if that makes sense. So, like,
Yeah,
there's so many layers. You know what I mean? Like the content itself, how you're shooting it, how long it is, the keywords that you're using in the text on the actual video versus in the description. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, there's so many layers. And so I could see why it would be overwhelming. Think about that's one piece of content. And you have
yeah.
to be producing lots of content to like get who you want to see you. So yeah.
And what kind of clients do you like? What clients do you work with? Categories. You don't have to give names. I mean,
Yeah, of course. It's interesting. So we're industry agnostic, but we're very specific in the startup space. So pretty much companies that have gone through like their seed round or Series A, Series B come to us. And so it's almost like founders who've been running their social media and know that like it's time to hire a team. And so we act as the external person on their team. We're very like high touch. So it's almost like we're part of your team. Or organizations who have had a social media manager for a long time and they've realized like we cannot execute at this level anymore. And they bring us on and we work with a social media manager to do like full execution. So all the brands we work with are full execution from like strategy, copy, content, posting, community management, like the whole shebang. Some cool spaces we've been sitting in is climate. So, like, we're working with a space venture capital firm right now and a organization based in the UK that's doing something really cool with green hydrogen and power. We've done solar companies, we've sat in the women's health space, but they all have this same underlying thing. It's like startup mentality. Let's move fast, let's execute quickly. And that's where we work really well.
okay. And where can people find you and find more about your agency?
Yes, of course. So quimbydigital.com is where you can find us. And then if you want to get a hold of me specifically, it's Ashley at quimbydigital.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with me today.
Of course, it was a great conversation and thank you for having me, Erica.